Welcome to our exploration of the history of presidential inaugurations in the United States, a key event in American democracy. Every 4 years, the nation gathers to witness the peaceful transition of power from one president to another, a tradition that has evolved over time. However, times have changed, and in the year 2025, former President Donald J. Trump has been re-elected for presidency and will go into office a convicted felon, which may be a game changer for this country as a whole. With that being said, here is the history of presidential inaugurations in the United States of America. The first U.S. presidential inauguration took place in 1789 when George Washington became the first president of the United States. Washington took the oath of office in New York City on April 30th, marking the beginning of a tradition that would define the American Republic for centuries to come. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate celebrations, just the solemn oath and Washington's dignified leadership. In the early years of the Republic, inaugurations were relatively modest affairs, especially compared to the grand spectacle we know today. The swearing-in ceremony took place at Federal Hall in New York City and later in Philadelphia, the temporary capital before the inauguration moved to Washington, D.C. Throughout the 18th century and into the 19th, inaugurations were civil occasions, small official gatherings with speeches and prayers, often followed by military parades. The first real public spectacle of an inauguration came in 1829 with President Andrew Jackson. Jackson's inauguration was a dramatic shift from previous ones. Instead of a dignified procession, Jackson's supporters, many of them common folk, flooded into the White House after the ceremony. The resulting chaos led to broken furniture and an unruly crowd, marking a significant change in how inaugurations would be celebrated. As the 19th century progressed, presidential inaugurations became more formal affairs. Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration in 1865, held at the end of the Civil War, reflected the nation's sorrow and hope for healing. With the country still reeling from the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln, his successor, Andrew Johnson, would take his oath in 1865. Later inaugurations would grow into lavish parades, ballrooms, and grand festivities. Grover Cleveland's inauguration in 1885 was the first to feature a national parade, marking a tradition of celebratory processions that would continue for decades. As the 19th century progressed, presidential inaugurations became more formal affairs. Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration in 1865, held at the end of the Civil War, reflected the nation's sorrow and hope for healing. With the country still reeling from the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln, his successor, Andrew Johnson, would take his oath in 1865. Later inaugurations would grow into lavish parades, ballrooms, and grand festivities. Grover Cleveland's inauguration in 1885 was the first to feature a national parade, marking a tradition of celebratory processions that would continue for decades. In the 20th century, presidential inaugurations became large-scale celebrations, particularly with the advent of modern media. In 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt's inaugural address, delivered during the Great Depression, was broadcast over the radio, allowing millions to hear the president speak. Then in 1961, President John F. Kennedy's inaugural speech was the first to be broadcast live on television, reaching an even larger audience. His famous line, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," became one of the most memorable moments in inauguration history. In more recent years, the role of the inaugural parade has changed. While still an essential tradition, it now includes celebrity performances, marching bands, and displays of military power. These parades, however, have also become platforms for political protests and demonstrations, reflecting the changing nature of the public's engagement with the ceremony. Though the style and scale of presidential inaugurations have changed, the core principle remains the same: the peaceful transfer of power. Each inauguration is a reaffirmation of American democracy, a symbol of hope, and a reminder that the United States operates under the rule of law, not the rule of an individual. In modern times, it's also an opportunity to unite the nation with celebrations, prayers, and speeches that speak to the values of the Republic. From George Washington's quiet oath to the extravagant celebrations of today, Presidential inaugurations have mirrored the evolution of the United States itself. They remind us of the promises of democracy, liberty, and justice, values that continue to guide the nation as it embarks on the next chapter with every new administration. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of U.S. presidential inaugurations. May the peaceful transfer of power continue to inspire future generations. Thank you for watching, and may God be with you.